I'm Chio Crooks, and I'm going to go ahead and do my persuasion speech on, is the human genome deteriorating? So I believe that the human species is becoming a genetically inferior animal. What I mean by this is that the human genome or DNA sequence is not getting stronger or improving, but becoming weaker and degrading. I think it is only a matter of time before we breed ourselves into such a weak species that extinction is inevitable. Radical thinking? Perhaps, but I'm here to share my thoughts on the matter with you, the audience. Perhaps you will agree with me, or at least give this matter consideration. So why would I think that humans are becoming weaker and stronger? Well, if we look at the population today, it has grown to numbers that have never seen before in the history of the world. Humans are living longer than ever, with centenarians becoming commonplace. Some scientists even think that a lifespan of 120 years is possible today. People are kept alive longer with medical conditions that are treatable, extending lifespans. All this sounds great and seems to contradict what I'm stating. Let's discuss Charles Darwin. In the most basic terms, he described in each species survival was based on the fittest. That means the individual that exhibited the best look or the most intelligence or that was healthier than the others would survive and procreate. Their DNA sequence was passed on to the offspring. Animals with the genetic coding for less successful traits did not survive, let alone procreate, thus ending that particular DNA sequence. I think that we can all agree that this is fact and has happened throughout the ages with all the animals on the planet, including humans. Again, everything I've said has not proven my belief at all. Let's look back 200 years or even further back to the time of the bubonic plague. I bring up the Black Death as a major pandemic that culled the human population, weeding out the weaker members of it. Humans that were naturally immune or survived the plague were able to pass on that trait of immunity to future generations, thus strengthening the species against that virus. Even 200 years ago, people that were born with genetic abnormalities or defects did not survive and were not able to pass that genetic mutation or defect on to subsequent generations. For example, something like diabetes or cystic fibrosis 200 years ago would have drastically decreased the lifespan of a person, thus limiting them from reproducing and passing on the genome sequence. I hope you're starting to see where I'm going with this. So in the 20th century, we saw tremendous advances in modern medicine. As a matter of fact, the Spanish influenza of 1970 gave birth to modern medicine as we know it. The Spanish influenza was the last major pandemic that resulted in worldwide reduction of the human population. Post that, vaccinations became prevalent and even mandatory. Medicines were mass-produced and available worldwide. Treatments of various medical conditions allowed people to live longer. These people that perhaps would not have made it to adulthood survived, married, and procreated, and passed their genetic code off to their offspring. Additionally, we could even say that population grew. People with less effective traits married and procreated as well. As much as we want to be accepting to all inclusive of every different person, many of the differences are a result of mutations in the genetic sequence. Whereas previously in history, mutations that did not strengthen a species would die out within generations. Today, there's no safety measure in place anymore. So please forgive me if I discuss any medical condition that you or a family member have in my talk. I did not mean to insult or offend or imply any genetic defects. That being said, let us use the example of a congenital heart defect. The name itself implies there is a genetic abnormality that caused the problem. Specifically, tetralogy of Fallot was fatal prior to the pioneering surgery of Vivian Thomas and Alfred Balloch in the 1940s. Once they perfected it, those infants survived into adulthood and could procreate, passing their genetic sequence on to future generations. Another example, and I know this is a touchy subject, is in vitro fertilization. I know some religious people believe that fertilization is God's will and should not be circumvented. I believe that nature and genetic coding that prevents fertilization, the embryo from implanting, or miscarriages is what should be adhered to. Once again, modern medicine is able to bypass the selection process. Okay, let's get back to my point. It is estimated that with the continued non-evolutionary advantageous genetic mutations, it would take 6,000 years for humans to breed themselves into extinction. The progress of medicine has been a double-edged sword. Has it improved life? Yes and no. People are able to live longer, oftentimes at the cost of quality of life, and most assuredly at the cost of the human genome and the natural selection process. I would not say that humans are devolving, but breeding themselves into a genetically inferior species. In the end, we will not be the apex predator on the planet.